it asks us to find a solution. No one is staying up at night in Tallahassee looking for funding for Tri-Rail. They have told us to go to our counties and figure out what we can eliminate from the capital plan.
A funding cliff for Tri-Rail that could stop South Florida's commuter rail in its tracks eventually. Despite a record ridership, the Florida Department of Transportation slashed funding this year, setting up a scramble for options at the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority's meeting on Friday. Tri-Rail expected more than $62 million from FDOT. Instead, the offer is $15 million. And this news comes just as South Florida's Regional Transportation Authority, the people who run Tri-Rail, announced a record number of riders, 4.5 million rides in the past year. Dech is the executive director of South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, and that runs Tri-Rail right here at the table, stopping right here at the table in its tracks. So happy to have you, because you're the man with the plan and the vision, and I've heard you speak. And I guess my biggest question is, does ridership not sweeten the pot when they look to budget money? People see, wow, it's working, let's make it work more.
So I would say yes, ridership does sweeten the pot. We would probably be in a much worse location than we are today if we didn't have any ridership.
Which might be valid, right? I mean, if it wasn't working, it's not working.
Absolutely. For the past 3 years, well, even before that, you know, the concentration of this agency has been to improve the rider experience and grow ridership to prove the value of SFRTA and Tri-Rail.
Explain to people, Tri-Rail goes north-south on the tracks. Brightline, relatively much newer, goes north-south on the tracks. Explain to people what the difference in the commuter sense is.
Absolutely. So there's two parallel lines in South Florida. One that we run on is owned by the state, and that is the old CSX line. It's a little bit closer to I-95. Brightline runs on the Florida East Coast line, which is a little bit further closer to the beach. Brightline is a high-speed inner city passenger rail, where we are commuter rail. We actually have the same top speeds in this area, but we stop 18 times.
And Tri-Rail is a commuter rail for Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. This isn't a state thing. This is definitely a South Florida megalopolis commuter item.
It is a South Florida commuter item, but the railroad is owned by the state. So it's state infrastructure, but the benefit here is locally. When we run from Mangonia Park in Palm Beach County all the way down into Miami International Airport and then into Miami Central, we share with Brightline.
And it's been more successful year by year because it is very convenient for people who commute. And so now we're watching the authority meeting and we're looking at people struggling for ways to cut here, cut there, keep Tri-Rail running. What did you come up with, if anything?
So we've been working for years on restructuring our operation and maintenance contracts, but those are not, they don't expire for a little while. So, we are looking internally. We're trying to look at everything in the agency as well as, some of our side services, I guess I should call, to try to reduce and become more efficient and not affect the core service of the Tri-Rail.
Because right now it sounded from the meeting like June of 26, essentially less than a year, will be we run out of money time.
So we have the money to operate our service as it is today till June of 27.
27.
That is
okay.
Correct, yes.
So 2 more years, and when you say operate as it is today, that sort of sounds like you're looking at ways to cut so that you can extend that line. What are you looking at?
So
I mean, you just mentioned some of those things.
Yeah, the biggest opportunity for us is in these contracts. 90% of our expenses are in the contracts. I could cut off my entire staff. I could close the building and get rid of everybody, and we would run for an additional 6 weeks. That's not a long-term solution. Right. So this is about finding funding mechanisms, working with the 3 counties as well as the state for how we can continue this operation.
So there was a lot of talk between the members about first mile, last mile. And I think this is a really important concept because Tri-Rail, unlike the New York City subway where you can go anywhere from anywhere, this goes up and back and up and back. And once you get off the train, how do you get to where you're going? How important is that first mile, last mile component?
For all of transit, it's a huge deal for us in particular because we don't run through the city centers and things like that.
Right.
It becomes that much more important, which is why we've had this program where we will subsidize an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi to try to get that first mile, last mile. We have a lot of riders. We have about 1,000 bicycles a day. We have probably 700 scooters a day. So we have a lot of people who are trying to solve that problem on their own. But we need to evaluate that first mile, last mile and say, yes, that's part of the reason we've gotten this record ridership. Can we afford to dial it back, or do we need to?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are looking for ways to use that as mass transit, but again, it's difficult for a lot of people in that respect. And one of the West Palm Beach member of the authority was talking about something really interesting to me is that the whole concept of Tri-Rail is to get traffic off of I-95, which they're constructing and expanding, but that's another story. So to get traffic off of I-95, why subsidize a ride share, which is putting another car back on the streets, rather than shuttle buses or something like that? That's a valid point.
It's an absolutely valid point. We used to have, at some point, we had buses that we used on routes to bring in. And then after COVID and during COVID, and when the ridership was there, it actually was more cost effective for us to have the Uber and Lyfts than to have the buses that run to run this entire route.
Talk to me a little bit about, and I'm not sure this is your purview, so tell me if I'm a little off base here, but as a commuter, as a driver, you know, you look at 836 being double decked. You looked at I-95 being constructed. There's Fort Lauderdale, when you go through Broward County, a lot of construction. The future of commuting in South Florida is apparently roads. How difficult is that when you operate something like Tri-Rail, which could be a growing component of mass transit in a growing place? How frustrating, well, let me ask it this way. What do you tell people responsible for funding you about that?
Well, I always believe in the and. I don't necessarily think this is an and/or equation.
That's
I think
quite
that
diplomatic.
I think that we can have road construction. Listen, there's people who are never going to ride a train, and we need to have a way for them to get north and south. But if you're not ever going to ride the train, you want everyone around you on that train. So I do think there's room for both. I think there's room for commuter rail as well as to be able to have the ongoing construction for the roads.
And the FDOT, the state component of funding, I mean, we who cover Tallahassee and the budgets that they're doing, there appears to be an increasing appetite for taking state financial responsibility and putting a lot of it back on local governments, on the counties and on the cities. And it seems like that's what's going on here in this moment.
That's exactly what's going on, and it's been no secret. It was part of our charter and our statutory that established us that we would work cooperatively to try to establish dedicated funding sources. SFRT has been doing that for decades, working cooperatively and trying. We were having conversations between the state and the counties before the budget came out, but when the budget came out and the changes that were in it, it certainly made it much more aggressive.
So what now?
So now we continue. We have a meeting coming up here in another week. So we've been meeting about every other week with the counties and the state in those negotiations, and we have another meeting next week. And I think that we'll see here, you know, if the counties have decided that Tri-Rail is of value and whether we want to keep it, that was question number one, right?
Which the numbers show it probably is.
I think so, but I am biased. But is Tri-Rail value? And then the second question is at what price? So the counties have been working internally on that, and it's fantastic. We have very, very senior leadership in the county that are involved in this. So it's important to the counties, it's important to the state, it's important to us. I am optimistic that we're going to come out the other side of this. We may come out the other side of this with an actual dedicated funding source that has, you know, inflationary indexes and everything else. We may come out better than we went in. But I'm really optimistic and driving towards that goal.
I'm laughing because everyone who sits in this chair and whatever we report, it's like the Debbie Downer budget year right now. So you're the first person I've heard so optimistic.
I have to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
David Dech, great to have you aboard. Please do come back.
It was an absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Of course.